Hi, I'm AJ, and I'm going to guide you through your Zipup Activation, your foundation for the breathography breath cycle and all HYPOXiX workouts. For today, please have a wall close by because we are going to use that wall for proprioception for those key postural points in our Zipup Activation. Additionally, please imagine a ribbon around your waist so that we can strategically imagine that we're loosening and tightening a ribbon around the waist. Now, for optimization, please have an ab ribbon, a product that I designed to optimize your feedback as to where you are in your breathography breath cycle as you go through your HYPOXiX workouts. Let's begin. Let's get back to the wall. Okay, so the breathography breath cycle always begins with a Zipup activation because it's setting our posture up and our core up for all of our functional movements and all of our breath patterns, okay? We are always beginning with a pelvic floor contraction. You're going to hear me say at the beginning of many of the exercises, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That signifies a zipper from the bottom to the top, where count 1 is our pelvic floor contracting, count 2 is our navel pulling in, and I will say navel, but really it's the entire circumference of your waist drawing in. That's one of those muscles that protects your low back. Count 3 is ribs dropping, gently pushing back into that wall behind you. Count 4 is shoulders gently pulling back, not with intensity, just a little lift. So it's all very gentle. And then count 5 is your head pushing back. So check this out. It's like a zipper, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now that's the sped up version. This video is all about slowing it down and learning each stage of that Zipup activation. So we're going to begin by breaking it down to 7 counts. All right, so push yourself back against the wall. We're going to begin by segmenting the pelvic floor contraction into 3 separate components so that you can have a deep understanding as to what the pelvic floor is. Now, the pelvic floor has muscles that move and that lay in several directions. There's front to back, so I want you to imagine it's your pubic bone connected to your tailbone or even your sphincter. I mean, we're going to get graphic here because the pelvic floor, it's deep, it's in there for the women, it's like cervix for men, testicle area. We're going to talk about sphincter, the front, the pubic bone. All of those key landmarks are important to visualize here because I really want you to understand what the pelvic floor is because it is so crucial as count 1 of your Zipup activation. So, to break that pelvic floor down into 3 components, I want you to imagine that you're pulling your tailbone or your coccyx and your pubic bone together in this direction. So it looks like, well, my hand is going to represent it because you can't see my pelvic floor. So we pulled those 2 points together. Then I want you to imagine that your sit bones are pulling together in this direction. It's just another gentle squeeze of the muscles. Pretend like you have to pee really bad, or you are peeing and you're stopping your pee in midstream, or you're trying to prevent your pee from coming out because you don't want to, if you have to go to the bathroom really bad, you don't want to pee on the ground. So I want you to visualize that and imagine that sensation, okay? Now, it may be challenging right now to differentiate between this and this. That's really just to give you the amount of time that you need to feel that pelvic floor contraction and serve as the basis for your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, count 1 is pull together in this direction. That's your pubic bone and your coccyx and your tailbone. Count 2 are more fibers pulling together. If you know what those sit bones are, those are the bones that you feel when you sit on a chair. Now those bones are pulling together on count 2. Count 3 is all of that whole pelvic floor area that you just contracted in this direction, now it's getting sucked up in this direction. For women, it's that feeling of the cervix drawing up and contracting, and so that's I can give you several examples. One for a female, it's like a tampon, you're squeezing it and you're holding it and you're pulling it up, right? And for a man, it's really a gentle lift of the testicles, okay? So it's 1, 2, lift it all up on count 3. And that's the powerful visual, right? Because you have all these muscles contracted and then you're pulling up on count 3. Do not be discouraged if you don't get this yet, because I want you to keep repeating this video until you have a deep understanding of what the Zipup activation is before you move on to your engaged inhalation, okay? So let's practice again. 1, 2, sit bones together. 3, everything draws up. Now count 4 is your navel, okay? The navel pulling in I want you to imagine that you're loosening the ribbon around the waist when I say navel, okay? That's a muscle called your transversus abdominis, and it's the only muscle in your body that acts like a corset and actually stabilizes your lumbar spine, your low back, okay? And this is one of the reasons we do the Zipup activation, so we're very stable for exercise. So now we're going to add that one count on. So we're going to start with 3 counts for the pelvic floor and then add a count for the navel. Here we go. So we pull together 1, pull together in this direction 2, count 3. All of those muscles draw up. That's count 3 of the pelvic floor. Count 4 is navel. So you're pulling the navel in, okay? But you're also pulling in at the sides, and we will tack this on in tandem with an exhalation so that you feel how the exhale helps to accelerate the activation of those muscles, okay? The next step for us is pressing the ribs equally back into the wall, but we're not letting go of this. We're not letting go of this. Then we're pushing the shoulders back into the wall, and then we're pushing the head back into the wall. Now, if there's pain associated with any of these movements, I want you to not push as aggressively. For some people who may have issues in their cervical spine, arthritic changes, or whatever it may be, then just imagine that you're pushing your head back, but don't force it back. There shouldn't be pain with any of these, with any of these muscular contractions, with any of these movements. So let's take our 7 count Zipup activation again, okay? Here we go. Pelvic floor this way. That's pubic bone and coccyx. This way, sit bones pulling together. This way, pelvic floor count 3, navel on count 4, ribs count 5 are pressing back into the wall. 6, the shoulders press back, and 7, the head presses back. Okay, let's practice one more time before we add our hiss exhalation. Okay, so again, 1 is this way, 2, sit bones pull together, 3, you're drawing it up. 4, your navel pulls back. 5, your ribs push back. Keep all this engaged. 6, your shoulders push back. And then 7, your head pushes back. Okay? Now, we're going to take it a little more up-tempo. In many of my workouts, you will hear a metronome playing, and that is because we stay at a maximum breath rate of 6 breaths per minute in the workout. That is strategic, and so we keep that metronome at 60 beats per minute. So I'm not playing the metronome today, but trust me, I have that I have that tempo memorized. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and now I'm gonna say the name of the body part as we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, okay? So I'm going to say pelvic floor 3 times in a row because we have 3 beats for those 3 actions of the pelvic floor. And then count 4 is navel, okay? 5 is ribs pressing back, 6 is shoulders pushing back, and then 7 is head pushing back, okay? So let's take it. Here we go. Hiss. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now I'm going to say the body parts. Once I'm going to demonstrate what it looks like and what it sounds like to do one continuous hiss for the Zipup activation. Let me demonstrate. You can practice with me if you would like. Here we go. Hiss. Notice how my hiss is continuous. I'm giving my breath a little bit of resistance, which is helping to increase the activity of my abs, and that's why we perform this on the hiss exhalation pattern, okay? So again, now I'm going to say pelvic floor, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and head so that you can have a clear visual as to what muscles you're activating as you go through, okay? Let's go in anatomical position, palms face forward. Here we go. Take an inhale and hiss. Pelvic floor, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. Everything releases. Let's take it again. Hiss, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and head. Everything releases. So you feel that zipper pulling up from the bottom. So you're so supported. Gravity is always working downwards on your pelvic floor. So you want to be lifting it because that is a form of anti-aging, right? We're preventing the aging of the pelvic floor because it's always being weighted down by gravity, right? And so we must fight. Okay, so let's take it again, one more time against the wall, and then we're going to take it in just a couple fun functional positions before we speed up that Zipup activation. So let's take it again. Remember, you're hissing the whole time. Hiss, but I'm going to say the names of the body parts. I'm not going to hiss, so that you can visualize those body parts, those muscles and the body parts moving in the way that they should, muscles contracting in the way that they should. So palms facing forward, take a big inhale. Here we go. Pelvic floor, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. Release one more time. Now I'll hiss with you. And hiss. Okay, there's our 7 counts. So let's hold a sumo squat position, okay? So we're just about here. Meet yourself where you're at. For some, you'll be down here. For some, you'll be here. But we're holding isometrically, meaning not moving. And now we're going to apply our 7 count zip up activation to our functional movement, okay? Held still so that you're still just focusing on the movement of that breath. 7 count, zip up activation on a hiss exhalation. Let's put your hands behind your head so you can press your head back into your hands on that head, when I say head, of the zip up activation. Take a big inhale. Here we go. Hiss, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. Let's take it again. I'll take it with you on a hiss. Here we go. Inhale. Hiss. Inhale. Let's practice one more time. Hiss. Whew, feel your abs, right? Those are your deep abs. Those are the ones that are preventing injury. So now we're in quadruped, and let's take our 7 count zip up activation in the quadruped position. Okay, so take a big inhale, release your abdominals. And here, when you're released in your abdominals, that ab ribbon is tight around your waist. Not too tight, but tight enough so that you feel the difference between the abdominals being released and the abdominals at the end of that hiss zip up activation should be a little bit loose around your waist. So you want to make sure that you position your ribbon perfectly so that you can feel the difference between being disengaged later down the line, the difference between an inhalation and that maximum exhale where you're really pulling in those muscles that loosen the ribbon around the waist. And there are a lot of injury preventative benefits of doing that. So let's inhale, release, and let's take it again. 7 counts. Hiss, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and head. Now, here's a good example. We're in a quadruped, so we're not pulling our shoulder blades together here. We're just taking a beat to ask ourselves, is my chest open? Are my shoulders? How is the posture in my shoulders? So you take a moment to just check in with yourself and see where the shoulders are in space, okay? So let's take that 7 count again. I'm going to say the body parts, but you please hiss, exhale, and loosen that ribbon around your waist. By the time you're at that navel and rib component of the zip up activation, because those are the muscles that when contracted properly are loosening the ribbon around your waist. Inhale. Here we go. Hiss, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and head. Now, head is really important in that 7 count, especially in that position or a plank or a push-up, because it's so common for the head to lean forward and hang forward, causes a lot of neck issues in that position. So retracting the head back away from the floor, pressing it back into the wall when you're doing any of your functional movements is so key in your results. And that is why I designed the zip up activation to end with a moment, just a beat to think about where your head is in space. Now, if you feel comfortable with that slow 7 count zip up activation, I want you to now go back to the wall, and we're going to speed it up just a little bit. Now, eventually, you will only have 2 seconds to perform that entire zip up activation because we don't want to spend 50% of our workout zip up activating. So once you become fluid at it, fluid and fluent, then moving on to the next section, and then you are ready to begin breathing through your entire breath cycle to support you during exercise for maximum core control and maximum results, because you are reducing your risk of injury by breathing in this way during the workout. So now here we're going to take, and now we're working, that was the hardest part. Now that you've gone through the 7 count, you have a deeper understanding of it. Now we're going to break it down to 6 counts instead of 7 counts. So now instead of separating these 2 components, I want you to
perform those first two components together. So that's why I start my hand open and I close it. It's like a parachute closing. So really it's this direction, it's the don't pee and really the don't poo in the back. Sorry, I told you we're getting graphic here. We're learning about the pelvic floor. So we're moving in this direction and this direction at the same time. So you can imagine either like a plus sign and pulling all corners of the plus sign together, or a parachute closing, whatever the best visual is for you, please visualize that. So that's count 1. Everything pulls in, and then count 2 is everything pulling up in this direction. So now we only have 2 counts devoted to our pelvic floor. Okay, so we have 1, 2, count 3 is navel, count 4 is ribs, count 5 is shoulders, count 6 is head. So all that we've done is we've combined those first 2 contractions of the pelvic floor into one. Let's practice on a hiss. I'm going to use my hand to demonstrate what those deep muscles are doing, starting with that pelvic floor, parachute closing, plus sign closing. Activation, inhale. 1, 2, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. Everything releases. Take it again. Hiss. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Everything releases. Let's take it again. Hiss. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. One more time against the wall, and really feel the base of the rib cage driving back. And just a little note on neutral spine here. Make sure that you're not over flattening your low back into the wall, because for many, that's increasing the activity of your superficial abs too much, meaning it inhibits those deep abs that we really want, that loosen the ribbon around the waist. In fact, you may feel the ribbon tighten around the waist when you flatten your low back against the wall. And so be mindful of that. For most of us, pressing the rib cage back into the wall and then pulling the navel back but not flattening the low back is a better neutral spine. And your muscles and your pelvis and all those muscles that help to prevent injury are going to have a mechanical advantage and are going to more effectively give you a contraction and power to be able to execute the zip-up activation, okay? So just be mindful of that. You don't want to be here, right? Then you're sticking your butt out and there's too much space between the wall and your low back, but you won't be able to press your ribs back if you're in that, it's called an anterior tilt when you stick your butt out like that. So I just want you to imagine base of ribs right here. I want you to push back into the wall, right? When I say ribs, but not necessarily flattening the low back. So let's practice that 6 count on a hiss one more time. Anatomical position. Let's go. Inhale and hiss. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. Okay, let's go to the functional, connecting it to a functional movement. So hands behind the head, zip up activation from a sumo squat. Here we go. 6 count. Inhale. Hiss, hiss, hiss. 5, 6. Everything releases. Let's take it again. Now I'll say those body parts. Inhale and hiss. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. One more time. Inhale and hiss. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. Okay, now let's take it to our quadruped position. Let's practice our 6 count zip-up activation in quadruped. Here we go. Release the abs. Inhale and hiss. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. Everything releases. One more time. Hiss. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. And notice as you take that hiss exhalation, by the time you're at like the 3rd or 4th second and you're drawing in those muscles at the same time, you will feel that ribbon, or imagine the ribbon loosening around the waist. And that is a natural action of those core and those breathing muscles that you're working in tandem to create that effect, right? Because I could bear down and jut my abdomen out as I'm exhaling, and it wouldn't have the same effect. So by strategically activating these muscles as you exhale, you're going to get that loosening of the ribbon, and that's so incredibly fundamental to the breathography breath cycle and to the HYPOXiX workouts in general. Okay, now let's go back to the wall, and now we're going to break it down to a 5 count. We're going to break it down to a 5 count, which is where it's at in the workouts, but we're going to go nice and slow with the 5 count first, and then we'll end by speeding it up. And I don't want you to move on to the next video until you feel comfortable working up tempo with this 5 count zip-up activation. So for the 5 count zip-up activation, we are combining all aspects of the pelvic floor. So not only is the parachute closing, but it's also lifting up at the same time. So it goes like this. 1, okay? So that plus sign, it's coming together. You're pulling the sit bones together. You're pulling the pubic symphysis into the tailbone, and you're lifting up. So it takes a lot of strength, and it takes a lot of neuromuscular connection, right? That mind-body connection to that area in your body to get that, okay? So that's count 1. Count 2 is navel. Count 3 is ribs. Count 4 is shoulders. Count 5 is head. So we've gone over all of this. The only change is that you're combining all of the elements of the pelvic floor into count 1, okay? So let's take it slowly on a hiss exhalation. I want you to breathe with it now immediately, because you will feel that higher level of efficacy when you use that exhalation, that hiss exhalation in tandem with these muscular contractions, okay? So here we go. Inhale, hiss, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and head. There's the 5 count. Let's take it again. Hiss, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. One more time. Release. Here we go. Hiss, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. Let's take that 5 count in our sumo position. So bring your hands behind your head, and here we go. Take a big inhale through the nostrils. Here we go. Hiss, pelvic floor, navel, ribs. Keep exhaling, shoulders, and head. Release. 3 more times here. Really getting that deep ab workout. And pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. And you want to continue that sensation of the zipper pulling up the whole time. And inhale. And again, hiss, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. Release. One more time. Hiss, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. Let's take that 5 count, that slow 5 count, to the quadruped position. Okay, here we go. And inhale. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. I took a little long with that pelvic floor, so hopefully you got an extra contraction. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Inhale, release. Let's take it again. Pelvic floor is all in that 1 beat. Inhale and hiss. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. Inhale, release. Again, hiss. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, and a head. Release. Now, stand back up. One last little section. This is the section that I want you to become skilled at and not move on to the next section until you feel very confident in going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the same 5 count that you just learned, but it's up tempo. This ultimately is our setup for most of the exercises in the HYPOXiX workouts using the breathography breath cycle. Okay, so put yourself back against the wall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. Okay? And if it feels like you lose that contraction with the pelvic floor, then maybe don't move on to this fast 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yet. Practice the first half of the video until you feel skilled with that and you feel comfortable with that. Then move on to the faster version. You must complete the faster version before moving on to the engaged inhalation, which is the next stage of the breathography breath cycle, okay? So let's practice. Let's get into it. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head, okay? Like a zipper from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? And remember, it's pulling together like this and up at the same time for that pelvic floor, okay? So shoulders back. Here we go. Let's begin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. That's the Zipup activation. I'm super loose with my ab ribbon. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go into my engaged inhalation. Let's take it 2 more times back against the wall. I want you to feel those ribs driving back into the wall when I say ribs. Inhale and hiss. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So zipped up. Inhale, let's take it again. Hiss. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. Inhale. Hiss. Hiss. I thought I'd show you one on just the hiss. I usually, in most classes, I will cue you through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes I'll say pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. That's a little wordy, so I don't always, once you get into the more, intermediate, advanced classes, I'm only saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because you know what that is, and you've developed a strong level of endurance in those muscles. Let's practice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in our sumo. All right, so here we go. Release, inhale, and pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. Inhale, release on a hiss. Now make sure you're not tucking, right? So you want to keep that same, so that's where we always start against the wall. I want you to push your ribs back, but I want you to really settle yourself in that neutral spine. Over tucking, then we're over utilizing those superficial abdominals that make the ribbon around the waist tight to stabilize the spine. And that's not what we want right now for the zip up activation. Let's take it one more time in sumo. Inhale and hiss, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, one more time. Hiss, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. That's it. Let's take it to our quadruped position. Inhale and hiss, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Loosen the ribbon. Now tighten the ribbon on the inhale. And again, pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. Inhale, release again. Pelvic floor, navel, ribs, shoulders, head. Inhale, one more on a hiss. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And release. Please keep practicing all of those exercises and do not move on to the next section, the engaged inhalation, until you have a high level of mastery with the zip up activation, because the breathography breath cycles add initially a certain very exciting complexity to your workouts. You want to make sure that you work slowly and that you have an understanding of the zip up activation so that you can graduate to the next level. So the zip up activation almost becomes organic and involuntary when you get into the workouts, okay, as you start using them in tandem. Keep practicing that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with speed until you feel comfortable enough that it almost feels organic and involuntary. Thank you so much for learning the zip up activation. I will see you for the engaged inhalation.